Welcome to the Science of Gratitude podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Mukanga, and each week we'll explore how gratitude transforms our lives through powerful stories and insights. Let's dive in. Hello everyone, this is your host, Dr. Valerie Mukanga, here to introduce to you the Science of Gratitude podcast. I want in this episode to talk to you about what got us to actually start hosting this podcast, The Science of Gratitude. Okay, so first of all, before we even go into it, I want to go into a couple of definitions, right? So gratitude is the first definition that we will dive into. Gratitude. What is gratitude? Gratitude is the state of being grateful, the state of being thankful, the state of being appreciative for the things around you, for the people around you, for circumstances that you are going through. Okay? Being grateful is the attitude by which you acknowledge the value, the great value that those things that you are being grateful or the people that you be grateful for actually hold in themselves. Okay. And in life, honestly, we have so many things that we can be grateful for, but sometimes, it's kind of difficult or we don't really see the value of gratitude. And this is why we're bringing about this podcast. I'm going to talk about an example. Say you are a parent and you have children, and out of your children, you have that one child who is so grateful all the time. Grateful when you cook a simple meal. Grateful because you're taking them to school. Grateful because, whatever they're grateful for. For that child, whenever you have a grateful child, if they come to you and ask you something difficult, chances are you will want to go, above and beyond in order to provide them with what they're asking for, even if it's difficult, because they'll always appreciate the little things that you provide for them. They always appreciate the big things that you provide for them. So that's the advantage of being grateful, because what we want to do here is dive into, the advantage of being grateful. So it's very easy to be grateful for positive things. So yes, you have great friends, you're thankful. You have great parents, you're grateful. You have children who love you, adore you, you are grateful. It's easy. It's easy, when circumstances are lining up, you just got a home, you're grateful, full of joy, you're grateful. But how about when you're faced with situations who are more challenging? Are you able to be grateful then? In those instances, being grateful is also valuable. So that's what gratefulness is. Now, the reason why we are talking about the science of gratitude, it is because science in itself, right, is studies or experiences that have been done, experiments or analysis that have been concluded after empirical studies, right? So when we look at the science of gratitude, we're talking about the science of gratitude because gratitude has been tested by psychologists, by neuroscientists, by people like that, and many other researchers. They have conducted studies to see the impact of gratitude upon human, right? To see if gratitude is truly valuable. And guess what? They have come up with great conclusion. For example, psychiatrists have noted that, or psychologists much rather, they have concluded that when somebody is grateful, they are able to experience a lot of positivity in their lives. And it also diminishes, some of the bad outcomes. For example, they have noticed that when somebody is grateful or when people are grateful, it actually is going to help them decrease the level of anxiety. It can decrease depression. It can improve their health. So you can see, through the eyes of psychologists that gratefulness is very, very valuable. When it comes to neuroscience, for example, they have come to the same type of conclusion, is that when someone is grateful, it actually betters the state of their brain, even the way the brain processes events and circumstances, right? So there's so many benefits, right, of being grateful. You can even experience a better health, state. We can see that because many doctors, for people who have chronic diseases, such as, for example, hypertension or, diseases like that, or even heart problems even, yes, or gastric problems. In many instances, the doctors would advise people, say they're going through a surgery or, situations. Doctors would advise their patients to go ahead and forgive anybody that they are holding anything against, right? And forgiveness goes hand in hand with gratefulness as well, because it's very difficult to be grateful when you have people that you are holding a grudge towards, right? So by doing that, when it allows you to put yourself in a better environment. And so gratefulness is very, very, very valuable. And so now I was going to say also that the Bible, because we are talking about being grateful towards God in this podcast. The Science of Gratitude podcast is actually a podcast where we will invite guests so that they can tell stories of things that they are grateful for, or difficult situations that they have gone through and came out of, and reason why they are grateful, not only for good circumstances, but also for challenging circumstances that they have gone through. Because that, by sharing those stories, it actually gives a better outlook for other people who have gone through similar situation to have hope, knowing that them too can overcome whatever it is that a person sharing their experience had overcome. So in the Bible, since we are shifting, our focus of gratefulness towards God, I want to cite a Bible verse, and this Bible verse is First Thessalonians 5:18, and it says, "Give thanks in all circumstances, because this is God's will towards you." Right? And so God is the smartest being in this entire universe. If God is advising you to be grateful, you know that it's not just because. Yes, we need to be grateful just because, but there's so many things attached to that gratefulness. So many valuable outcomes that can come about by you being grateful. And God knows that. And that's why he's saying to be grateful in all circumstances, to be grateful in all circumstances. Because as I was saying before, right, it's easy. You have just carried a baby and you gave birth. You're grateful. You're grateful for the bundle of joy that you're carrying, right? Especially if you were that mother or that father that had tried so many times, especially since, for example, you had to go through in vitro in order to get that baby. But even if you didn't, you're grateful for life, right? Or if you had gone through some difficult studies, you have actually graduated. So you come to the culmination of the program. And now you're grateful, right? You're grateful because you're holding that degree. If you were one for whom it was so difficult to go from point A to point Z, and all of a sudden you are in a better position because you were able to acquire a car, won't you be grateful? You'll be grateful. But if you come to be like in a more difficult situation, a situation of failure, a situation where you have lost a loved one, or maybe a situation where, you did not pass a test, would you be grateful? And what would you be grateful for? This is where you actually have to understand that there are big benefits of you being grateful. And the more grateful you are, the more you get towards the things that you actually are in need of. Okay. So that's the reason why we were inspired to come to host this podcast, The Science of Gratitude. It's in order to inspire someone, encourage them to be grateful, no matter what they're going through, whether they are in the high season of their lives or the lower seasons of their life. We must be grateful in all things. Am I saying that being grateful is always easy? Am I saying that I am always grateful for situations? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that sometimes life can happen. Life can give you or throw so many curveballs at you that you're looking down, and you're like, what is this? What should I be grateful for? There's nothing to be grateful for, right? But I'm here to encourage you that you should always, always, always seek for things to be grateful for. I'm going to use a simple example of something that happened to us earlier this month. I live in Dallas area, and there was a period of time. It was maybe about 2 weeks or so where we experienced extreme winds. Okay. And that night in some areas, there were even tornadoes that had happened. And it was in the middle of the night. It was about 4 a.m. or so, earlier morning, okay, where I woke up and my husband and I were looking outside through the blinds, and our fence was bending. This one side of the fence was being bent by the force of the wind. And I was like, no, I prayed everything is going to be okay. We'll be fine. Well, guess what? About an hour after that, when we actually stepped out, because it was more like daylight had come, and the fence had actually bent on that one side. And that was the side of the fence that we were looking at. But on the other side of the fence, it had collapsed, right? And I looked at my husband and I said, you know what? We need to be grateful. We need to be grateful for this situation. Why? Because it could have been worse, It could have been our roof that was affected. This is only the fence, right? So now, we proceeded to find, some estimate as far as, fixing the fence, and that would be taken care of. But in the difficult situation, and even as I was telling the story to other people, I was like, you know what, this is what happened, but I choose to find something to be grateful for. I said that it could have been the roof of the house that would have been affected. And that would have been so, so, so much more costly, right? But it was only the fence, and we'll fix it. Is it pleasant? No. Is it not a difficult situation? No, especially after you said, I prayed and I know everything is going to be okay. And you look out and, it didn't quite happen the way you expected. I drove out that day to go to work, and I look in the neighborhood, and a few other of our neighbor had experienced this same thing, where the fences were affected by the storm. But when I look, it was a lot less people who were affected than, the people who were not affected than the people who were affected, right? And I started thinking, but why did it happen to us? And then I told myself, you know what? It's not even about that. I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful that it wasn't worse than what it was. So I went to work. A couple of days later, guess what? I came towards, I came back home earlier, and I was looking at some other people in the neighborhoods, and there were some neighbors that were trying to fix their roofs, right? And then some other days and then a couple more days later, I went to take a walk in the neighborhood, and I looked, and there were so many other people that had been affected, whose fence just fell down completely. And I was like, wow, sometimes God can preserve you for something, but you're not aware of it. As I said, it could have been our roof. And lo and behold, it did affect some other neighbors' roofs, right? And so am I happy about that? I'm not using that to say, lucky me, but I'm just saying that in any hard circumstance, there is always, always, always something that you can be grateful for. But sometimes you have to do your best to seek, to look for that thing to be grateful for, right? Sometimes it's not easy to see. Sometimes the circumstance or the situation you are in can be so dire that you don't even see anything to be grateful for. But you have to start practicing, the art of seeking what it is that you can be grateful for. And it will make you so much more happy, as other psychologists are saying, right? So that's what we're talking about. So having said that, and I know I use an example of of our fans, I now want to talk to you about my testimony. As I say, I'm Dr. Valerie Mukanga. I am a general dentist. I live in the area of Dallas Fort Worth, and I actually am the CEO of Healing Wings Dental, which is our dental practice located in Arlington, Texas. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about my journey and, so many things that I have experienced that caused me to seek gratefulness and to be grateful, for what happened to me. So I'm going to talk to you about my story, right? I was born in Belgium from parents who had gone to Belgium to pursue their studies. So my father was actually pursuing his PhD degree in demography, and my mother, she went into nursing school, as they were both in Belgium, Europe. And so we were born in those circumstances. At the time, I had two brothers. Now I have three brothers, and one older and two younger than I am. It was when I was about 8 years old that when my father had finished his studies, that we went back to what we call home, and it is the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Central Africa. This is the Congo, because there are two Congos. This is the one that used to be called Zaire. Okay, so we went back home and I grew up there. I went to school, and when I finished my studies, my parents now sent me to the US to pursue my studies because there was so much unrest in Kinshasa, which is the capital city of DRC. So the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in short, DRC. So yes, when I left, it was still Zaire, but as I was here, that's when the country assumed this new name. It's a long story, okay? But anyway, that's what happened. When I was here, I came and I studied English, first of all, as a second language. And after that, I went to Tulane University, where I pursued my bachelor degree in biology. I tell you that it was a period of time that was challenging for me, especially because even though I studied English as a second language and I could speak English very well, in some courses, for example, zoology, I found out that, I really couldn't understand some of these things because of the language barrier. And I remember, for example, that for that one class, my first test, I definitely had a D because when they were talking about some of these species, I didn't even know how to spell the name. I didn't even know how to spell it, to write it in my notes, let alone learning what they did. So I went to see my professor at the time, who actually gave me this advice. He said, what I want you to do is, because you have that limitation, I want you to actually take the notes of some of your classmates, study from their notes. If indeed, you succeed or you do better, I will focus myself. I would actually only consider the grades where you would have performed better, and I would cancel the first test that you did. And that's what happened. I met up with some classmates, started studying from their notes, and guess what? I finished that class I finished that class. I believe I had a B, if I remember correctly. It's been years, okay? So, but I did well. And the professor, indeed, he overlooked the first D that I had in the class. And so that's something I'm very grateful for because I experienced the favor, of God with that. Because the professor could have just given me that wonderful advice and say, what you need to do is study from your notes, and then we'll take an average of all the tests that you would have taken. But I experienced favor. I'm grateful for that. I'm telling you that there were so many circumstances that where I could see the hand of God and things that I am grateful for. So I graduated Tulane University, and I had no earthly idea what I wanted to do. Why? Because even though when I was younger, I remember one day my dad calling me in their bedroom, and he was asking me, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said I wanted to be a doctor. So I grew up always knowing that I was going to be a physician. But when I went to Tulane, I ended up in the hands of an advisor who advised me otherwise. And he was like, well, you're a foreigner and it's going to be very difficult for you to go to medical school. I suggest you do something else. And that really put a dent on my dream. And instead of me saying, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, I believed in that. Right. And so I quickly started changing what I wanted to do. I started wanting to do exercise and sports science, went to classes and realized, oh no, I can't, my brain doesn't function like that. This is not me. I can't do that. And eventually I continue on because I was a biology major. And I just went back to biology, and that's what I did. And the reason why I did biology, it was because I knew that, people who go to medical school or pre-med students, they do biology or they do chemistry. So I love biology, but honestly, biology is a science that I absolutely love. I love to understand how the body works. I love to understand, all these things about biology. And so thank God that's what I did. I remember, when I now decided to go in dental school, when I was studying for the test, I would just look at biology and I would actually worship God through the course, right? But anyway, I'm going ahead of myself. So after I graduated, I did biology, and now I wanted to take a break because I was tired. I mean, I was tired. I thought I would, only take 1 year off. And then after that, I would definitely pursue my studies in whatever I decided. So I one day, having done biology, not knowing what I was going to do next, I started taking like some computer classes. Quickly realized that that's not the way my brain was wired. I stopped taking those classes and started looking for a job. And I found a job. I started working in a biology lab, and we were testing food samples and, determining their nutritional values and, GMOs and all of that. That's what I was doing. Anyway, after a while, I would go on campus a lot. And so while I was studying, those classes in computers, I was one day close to the library, and to tell you the truth, I just kind of heard a voice saying dentistry. And I said, dentistry? Yeah, dentistry. Okay, dentistry. That is how I received this calling of dentistry. Can you believe that? It's important to know how to hear, how to discern the voice of God. And so now I was going to pursue dentistry. That was going to be my field of study. So I started studying for the test that I was mentioning to you earlier, for which I was zooming in on biology and just worshiping God with. I studied for the test. I passed the test. But then when applying to dental school, I now had to give a reason, because they ask you to write a statement as of why you're pursuing that particular field of study. And I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea why I was, pursuing dentistry. So that being said, I now had to go and search within myself what was the reason why I wanted to do dentistry, and realize quickly that I had always been wired for that, right? Because I remember my pastor one day, I was listening to one of his sermon, and he was saying, the way that you would know what you're called for could be by two ways. One way by what you absolutely love to do, and another way by what you absolutely hate, right? And so, though I didn't absolutely love dentistry, I didn't know anything about it. At the time, I had not really gone to, to a dentist on a regular basis. In fact, I remember going to the dentist only when I was a little girl. And I knew that there was something that bothered me, and I thought I was shallow. I didn't realize that it's because it was something that was wired inside of me. But I remember one day at my church, and I was looking at this girl. She had so many issues with her teeth, and it was very difficult for me, to focus on what she was saying, especially because at the time, whenever someone would speak in English, I would read lips. And that's the way I could understand, so much so that whenever I removed my glasses, I couldn't hear what the people were saying. I couldn't really understand well. I had to have my glasses. It's only later on in life that I realized that the reason why it bothered me so much was because I had in me, the desire or the power that was innate and that had to be developed to actually fix people's situations with their teeth, right? But beyond that, though, when I was little, when I say little, I was in my teenage year, I was about 15 years old. I had lost a front tooth. And with that being said, I walked around like there was no problem for many years. I had no tooth. It was a front tooth. And it's only when coming to the US, when my parents were about to send me to the US, that finally they took me to a dentist, and I was able to get a dental prosthesis to cover the missing tooth, right? So that being said, the bridge that they gave me actually was wider. It was way lighter in color than my other teeth. And I remember one day I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I were a dentist, because if I was, I would have fixed my smile. Well, wishful thinkings, but those were the seeds, placed in my heart. And so also in my family, a lot of people had experienced dental issues. For example, one of my aunts, she had halitosis, big fancy word for bad breath. And she also had a lot of cavities. So whenever she would actually speak, she would always cover her mouth. And she would always be, embarrassed about the state of her smile. So all of these things, build up into making me become more and more wired toward, this desire to become a dentist. And one day, as I was I was a sophomore, so my second year at the University of Tulane, I hear this call from someone in my family telling me that my uncle had passed away. He passed away because he had a dental infection, and he ended up having a stroke. And I thought, oh, please, they're just telling me stuff, man. This can't be real, It's only when I got into dental school that I realized that, lo and behold, is true. But anyway, that's something that we talk about on another platform, when we talk about oral health and its impact and all that. So we're not going to dive into that, right? This is just me talking to you about my story and reasons why I ended up pursuing dentistry and things that I am actually grateful for. So fast forward, I had applied to many schools, and the first time that I applied, I did not get accepted. So I didn't lose hope. I applied again the next time. And this time I had not applied to as many schools, but one of my friends that I actually went to school with, her name is Patrice, and she told me, hey, Valerie, do you know that the University of Tennessee is seeking for some some students who have actually gone through Katrina. So we were living in New Orleans, Tulane University is in New Orleans, and in 2005, Hurricane Katrina actually affected the area. And it's in 2006 that I actually applied to go to dental school. So they were looking for such patients, right? And so I applied to the University of Tennessee, and I went for the I went for the interview. I went with my spiritual father actually to the interview and completed the interview. The interview went well and came home. And later on, I was told that I was placed on a waiting list. Okay, so I had not gotten in. But one day, it was this one day when I actually I was supposed to go to work, but I was running late. I was tired, so I had called and told them that I would be late. And I received this phone call from Dr. Wisdom Coleman. He was the dean of admission. So Dr. Coleman, he's no longer with us, and he was such a great person. He called me and he said, "Hi, so Valerie, this is Dr. Coleman." I said, "Hi." And he said, "Are you still interested in coming to the University of Tennessee?" And trust me, at that point, I had no other options, right? No other schools contacted me or anything. And even when I was applying, Dr. Coleman, I told him, "Oh, Dr. Coleman, I heard that you guys have extended the admission for the people who have gone through Katrina." And honestly, it was like, it was only a few days left. He said, "Yes, we have, but you have to send everything in, because even if you are even one day late, you will not be accepted." I said, "Okay." I had already prepared everything. My statement was almost ready. I only had to make it how you say, I had to make it applicable to the University of Tennessee. And so that happened. And as I was saying, I was on the waiting list, and he called me that morning and he said, "Valerie, are you still interested in coming to the University of Tennessee?" I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Well, good news. You have been accepted." And I said, "Oh, thank you so much." I asked a few questions. I acted all normal. And I said, "Thank you so much," and everything. "What should I do now?" This and that. And we finished the conversation. He directed me accordingly, and I hung up the phone. When I hung up the phone, I was like, yes! I was so excited, because this was my lifelong dream. This was the only dream I had. I didn't want to do anything else. I only had one plan. It was plan A, because I had heard that I was called to be a dentist. So I no longer started looking for other things, even though things didn't work out. So I was excited, and we went to school, got in school, and everything like that. And I was grateful, right? I was grateful. I was so grateful while I was there. I did experience some challenges. I did not make it to one of the semesters, so I had to repeat the semester. It's something that I had always been afraid of talking about, but I have been freed, because this can be an encouragement for someone. I had never failed in my life. I had never repeated a year in my life, but this was the year that I was repeating the year. I sent in an appeal. The appeal was not taken into consideration, because they told me that it's not that I was removed from school. I was just told that I had to wait. And so I had to wait indeed. And it was challenging, because now you have a different class altogether, different classmates. Are they going to think I'm stupid? All of these things that come in your brain, And so anyway, I started doing very well. I started studying in groups, because before I was much more isolated. I would only study with one person, but now I really got with some of my classmates who will study together, explaining the material before the test and all of that. And lo and behold, I was able to do much better. And even my professor, they regarded me, they view me with high esteem, because I had overcome a challenge that maybe many other people would not have overcome. So that happened. Then it was the last year where we were supposed to take our board exam. And with that being said, we had to come up with some patients that had some specific procedures, and those procedures would need to be found on those patients. So I looked at my patients and they didn't have that. And so I kept looking, I kept asking around, and nobody had those kind of lesions that they were looking for. This was, to do some fillings, and there were specific type of fillings that had to be done in order to be considered for the test. And it was all upon us to find, those type of patients. So let me tell you this. I'm grateful. God is good. It was the day before the test. The day before the test, I had to come up with a patient. And I went to one of the clinics. It was the perio clinic. And over there, I just decided to go and observe, what the periodontist students were doing. And so while I was there was it was a student who was in his third year. He had a patient that he brought into that particular clinic so that he could experience, or so that they could do some periodontal surgery, or some surgery on his gum. Okay. And so while I was looking at the x-ray, I saw a lesion that would be a perfect lesion for me to treat. So I asked that particular student, Keith Jones, if I could actually ask the patient if he could come and be my patient the next day. He said, sure, you can ask. And so I asked the patient was willing. Oh my goodness. This was the day before the test. I had nobody to do my test on, right? And so that particular patient said yes. So the next day, I was waiting for the patient, because it's like this place. I mean, it's this day where, all the student doctors are welcoming their patients and all of that. And so I had my patient that was supposed to come, and he was late. And so finally he arrives. He arrives and he tells us the story about how while he was coming, and he lived about 2 hours away. While he was coming, he ended up having a flat tire, had to fix the tire, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I was appreciative that he actually made it, right? It wasn't my patient, it was somebody else's patient. He came in and all of that. And so he was wearing shorts, and he had knee surgeries. And for people who had knee surgeries, they had to be pre-medicated before, they would actually undergo a procedure, a dental procedure. So we didn't know that. But now, when the attending professor looked at him, they saw that he had a knee surgery and he had to be pre-medicated. We didn't have any of the antibiotics. So I went downstairs, and so one of my mentors, Dr. Lewis, and Dr. Morris Lewis, I went and I said, Doctor, do you have some antibiotics? And lo and behold, he had some antibiotics. Oh my goodness. So the patient took the antibiotics, and we started late, but we started, finished, and I passed my test. I'm telling you, I saw mercy and mercy. I saw favor and favor, throughout the course of my studies. And that's what I just wanted to share with you, right? If I was not in the right place at the right time, perhaps I was not going to have a patient to do a test, and God only knows what could have happened, as far as me, taking the board exam. Maybe I would have been able to take it later. Maybe I would have had to repeat a year again to do it. Who knows what the outcome would have been? But right in the nick of time, I was able to get a patient, not any kind of patient, but a patient that was loyal, that understood that he gave his word that he would be there, and that showed up no matter the circumstance that he went through. So I'm here to encourage you in any situation that you have gone through, that you're going through, that you will go through. Always be grateful. Always be thankful. Always seek a reason to be grateful, because when you actually make gratefulness your lifestyle, you will start to accumulate goodness after goodness good things after good things. And only God knows how long it would take. Maybe you're grateful for something today and the same hour you get something in return. Maybe it's going to be a year after. Maybe it's going to be years after. Maybe it's not going to be in this lifetime. Maybe it's your children that are going to benefit from your gratefulness. But you lack nothing in being grateful, especially when God says in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, be thankful in all circumstances. This is God's will towards you. Okay? So, this is again Dr. Valerie Mukanga. I wanted to talk to you about my personal story. I wanted to depict why we decided to go into this podcast, The Science of Gratitude, because I want you to see the positive outcomes that come from having a lifestyle of gratefulness. Okay, so if you have something for which you need to seek gratefulness for, do not hesitate to contact me. You can contact me through this podcast. You can contact me on my Facebook or on my Instagram handle. We'll be here for you. All right. And so I'm excited for this podcast. I'm grateful for this podcast. I know that many people will be inspired through this podcast. One thing that I would ask of you is that if you have found this episode to be valuable, please don't hesitate to download it, to share it, to comment, give us a review, so that, this good word can keep going throughout the world with, positive message of gratefulness and the science of it. This is Dr. Valerie Mukanga. I will leave you for today and wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Be utmostly blessed. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Science of Gratitude podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, share it, and leave us a review. Your support helps us keep spreading the power of gratitude. And until next time, stay grateful. God bless you.